Hey Pop-Tarts, I'm back with the Quarantine Read Aloud series, and today we are going to conclude with Chapter 20 of The I Survived the Attack of the Grizzlies, 1967, by Lauren Tarshis. Of course, I do not own the rights to this book, but I know you're all enjoying it because you love this series of books. So, here we go. The conclusion to I Survived the Attack of the Grizzlies, 1967. Chapter 20. 1 year later, August 5th, 1968. Here we are, Dad said as he turned down the dirt road that led to the cabin. The car had barely stopped before Kevin flung open the door and rushed down to the beach. "Wait for me," Pops called out, limping after him. Mel stepped out of the car and took a deep breath. Dad came around and put his arm across her shoulders. "Good to be back here." And it was. It looked the same as it always did. There was their snug cabin with the big front porch. There were the pine trees, and there was Lake McDonald, the bright blue water shimmering in the late afternoon sun. Everything looked the same, but things had changed here at Glacier. They'd been hearing all about it from Steve, and they'd read Cassie's new big story in National Geographic, how one tragic night in August would transform the park forever. The deaths of those two girls had transformed Glacier and other national parks in America. Campgrounds had been cleaned up. Granite Park Chalet had a huge new incinerator for trash. The manager, Greg, was gone. There were more rangers to patrol the trails and to follow up on reports of problem bears. Park visitors received a long list of rules for camping and hiking. To never leave trash or food behind in the campgrounds. To never feed the wildlife. To show respect. Some campers and hikers were following the rules. Some weren't. Mel knew that it would probably take years for some people to understand what it really meant to show respect for the wilderness. But at least now she felt some hope. After a simple dinner of hot dogs and beans, all four of them headed down to the beach. While Pops and Kevin built a campfire, Mel and Dad walked to the water's edge. They stood shoulder to shoulder and looked out on the lake. "Your mother loved it here so much," he said. "I know," Mel said. "Remember how she used to dare us to jump into the lake? And how she made us climb up to the top of that fire tower," Dad said. "And the time she caught 4 trout in one afternoon," Mel said, and then bragged about it all summer. They laughed. They talked about Mom all the time now, and when Mel felt that heart-cracking sadness coming over her, she didn't sit alone in her room. She found Dad, or Pops, or called one of her friends. "Mel," Kevin screeched, "Daddy, we're roasting marshmallows!" "Okay, Kev," Mel shouted back. "He's even bossier than Mom," Dad said, shaking his head and smiling, if that's possible. With the fire roaring, Pop started up his stories. Kevin snuggled on his lap, clutching his new favorite toy. Only Aunt Cassie would know where to find a stuffed porcupine. Mel looked around at her family. Her eyes stared at the water. She missed Mom so much, and she knew how happy Mom would be that they were here. Mel didn't try to stop her tears. Steve had been right. It was no good trying to hold things in. Running from sadness was like running from a grizzly bear. It would chase you, and it would catch you. Mel was done running away. Keep reading to learn why Lauren Tarshis wrote about the grizzly attacks and hear more amazing grizzly facts. A mother grizzly and her 2 cubs in Glacier National Park. Why I wanted to write about the grizzly attacks of 1967. Dear readers, you might think that after writing this book, I'm hiding under my desk with my poodle Roy, nervously watching out the window for grizzlies. But no, first of all, we don't have grizzlies in Connecticut. And more importantly, working on this book taught me that grizzlies are not to be feared. They are not bloodthirsty beasts. They are magnificent animals whose wilderness habits are under constant threat by humans. This book is not really about 2 terrifying animal attacks. It's about what happens when humans don't respect the wild. I first learned about the bear attacks of 1967 a couple years ago when I was visiting Glacier National Park. I was actually on my way home from a different I Survive research trip for my book about the eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington. As my husband, David, and I were heading back to Connecticut, we stopped in Glacier. It had been a long-time dream of mine to visit this famously beautiful national park. We had planned 3 days of hiking and exploring. It was in the Ranger Station bookstore that I spotted a book called Knights of the Grizzly by Jack Olson. As the author of I Survived and the editor of Storyworks, I am always on the lookout for ideas for books and articles. And I so snatched that book right up. Was it smart to read about grizzly bear attacks during a vacation in Glacier Park? Maybe not, but after reading just a few pages, I knew I had a topic for I Survived. As always, I did an enormous amount of research to create this story. I read at least 20 different books, I watched videos, studied photographs, and maps. I also studied the true stories of people who had been attacked by grizzlies. In almost all those cases, the person had accidentally surprised a grizzly in the wild. Several of the people had purposely approached a grizzly, hoping to get a photograph or a closer look. And that's what made the events of August 1967 so shocking. The young women who were tragically killed, Julie Hegelson and Michelle Coons, had not surprised or threatened grizzlies that attacked them. Both had been sleeping in campgrounds. But as scientists agree, the grizzlies cannot be blamed for those attacks. And of course, neither can those two young women. Those attacks happened because those bears had lost their fear of humans. Years of eating garbage and leftover food had changed the bears' behavior. The attacks of August 1967 shocked people across the country. Some people demanded that all grizzlies in Glacier and anywhere else in America be shot. Luckily, that did not happen. The Park Service recognized that Glacier and other national parks needed to be changed to make them safer for grizzlies and humans. In the days and weeks after the attacks, rangers began to clean up the park. The Park Service fixed campgrounds so that they were less likely to attract bears. They built garbage cans that even smart grizzlies couldn't open. They made strict rules about camping in the backcountry. Never again would they ignore warnings about problem bears. I hope this book has not made you afraid of grizzlies. My goal was to spark your curiosity so you'll want to learn more. I also hope this book inspires you to want to help protect our wilderness and the animals that live there. And I do hope you get to visit Glacier National Park at some point in your life. It really is a magical place. It's doubtful you'll ever see a grizzly, but if you do glimpse one from a safe distance, consider yourself lucky. Lauren Tarshis. And the caption for that picture: until the 1960s, people driving through Glacier and other national parks often stopped to feed wildlife. This is now strictly prohibited. Questions and answers about grizzly bears. Is it safe to hike and camp in areas where there are grizzlies? Every year, millions of people visit places like Glacier and Yellowstone National Parks and hike through grizzly country. Bear attacks are extremely rare. In fact, a person is far more likely to get hurt in a park by tripping on a trail or getting stung by a bee. Still, there are important rules for sharing the wilderness with grizzlies. Here are the basics of bear safety. Hiking groups. Groups of 3 or more are best. Watch for signs of bears in the area, like tracks and scat. Make lots of noise when hiking. Talk loudly, sing, and clap your hands. Whistling isn't a good idea because it could sound like an animal and actually attract a bear to you. Bells aren't a good idea either. If you do notice a bear, stay far away from it and all wildlife. Never approach a bear. You risk startling it if you go closer. Don't hike after dark or at dawn or dusk. That's when bears tend to be most active. Pay extra attention in areas where there are thick trees or where you can't see around you. Make extra noise near rushing water because it makes it hard for bears to hear you coming. Check for warnings or trailheads. Talk to rangers and ask if there have been bear sightings. Follow all their advice. Make sure people know where you are going and when you expect to be back. Have your family bring bear spray, but make sure that your parents practice using it. Studies have shown that is the most effective way to stop an aggressive bear. But bear spray only works if a person knows how to use it. The spray cans are tricky to use, and a bear spray can is only useful if it is easy to grab. Never keep it in a backpack. Caption for that picture: Bear country. All wildlife is dangerous. Do not approach or feed. Today in Glacier and other national parks, people are giving clear warnings about bear and other dangers. How many grizzlies are there in America? Before the 1700s, tens of thousands of grizzly bears roamed North America, as far south as Mexico and as far north as Alaska. Members of native nations and tribes hunted them and worshipped them. But during the 1800s, grizzlies were hunted and killed by settlers, farmers, and ranchers. By the 1960s, there were only about 1,000 left in the lower 48 states. That's every state except Alaska and Hawaii. The American government decided that the grizzly bear was in danger of becoming extinct, that it could disappear from the earth forever. It needed to be protected, and so, in 1975, the grizzly bear officially became a threatened species. This meant that the grizzly could no longer be hunted. Scientists work hard to help it recover in the wild. Today, there are an estimated 1,600 grizzly bears living mostly in Montana and Wyoming, including in Glacier and Yellowstone National Parks. Alaska has the biggest grizzly population in the world, 32,000. That's because there is a lot more open land and far fewer humans in our 49th state. There are also about 15,000 bears in Canada for similar reasons. A grizzly catches salmon in Katami National Park, Alaska. What's the difference between black bears and grizzlies? It's important to know the difference because grizzlies can be more dangerous. Grizzlies and black bears can be hard to tell apart, but both black, brown, and blonde grizzlies are usually bigger, but not always. The best way to tell the difference is that grizzlies have a hump between their shoulders. Black bears and grizzlies' faces also look different from the side. Black bears' profiles appear straight. Grizzlies have a dip in them, which is sometimes called a dished-in profile. Grizzlies' claws and black bear claws are also shaped differently. One more difference: black bears can and do climb trees. Some grizzlies do, but they are far less likely to. Study these pictures to see other differences. What should I do if I surprise a grizzly in the wild? You probably won't. Remember, grizzly sightings are very rare, and of course now that you know all the rules of hiking and camping in grizzly country, it's even less likely you're going to see one. But just so you know, because it's pretty interesting, here's what experts say to do. Most bears will not attack, so the most important and probably the hardest thing to do is stay calm. Do not run. This will cause the grizzly to run right after you. Keep an eye on the bear, but don't stare it in the eye. Speak in a low, calm voice. This is so the grizzly realizes that you are a human. Walk slowly away while still facing the bear. Here's where things get complicated. If a grizzly bear starts following you, climbing a tree is not a definite escape. Some grizzlies do climb. Sometimes a bear will charge you as a bluff. It is trying to scare you, but you shouldn't run. Most charges stop before the bear is very close. But if the bear keeps coming, just before it gets to you, fall to the ground. Lie on your stomach, hook your hands behind your neck, and play dead. Keep your backpack on to protect your back. Dig your toes and elbows into the ground so the bear can't roll you over. If it rolls you over, try to get back on your stomach. Be quiet and don't move. The attack should be quick and the bear will go away once it feels it is out of danger. After the bear leaves, stay still for as long as possible. If you start to move too soon and the bear is still nearby, it could resume the attack. Is Glacier National Park cleaner and safer today than it was in 1967? The events of August 1967 really did change Glacier and all America's 60 national parks. but those parks, including Glacier, are still facing serious threats. More people than ever are visiting America's parks. Last year, over 3 million people visited Glacier, compared to about 900,000 in 1967. Bigger crowds means more garbage, more noise, and more pollution from cars, motorcycles, and recreational vehicles. Another serious problem is climate change, which is making summers hotter and drier, especially out west. This is causing bigger and more frequent wildfires throughout the West. America's national parks are our treasures. Park rangers work hard to protect the animals that live there and the people who visit. We all need to work together and speak out to make sure our national parks get the attention they need and deserve. How can kids help protect wilderness and the animals that live there? This might seem like a strange answer, but here it is. Don't buy bottled water or use plastic grocery bags. Why? Because when you throw away a plastic water bottle or a plastic bag, there's a good chance that it is going to wind up in the wilderness or in the ocean, because that's where a huge amount of trash winds up. An estimated 8 million tons of plastic are swept into oceans every single year. Right now, in the Pacific Ocean, there is an island of plastic that is at least as big as the state of Texas. It's horrifying to think about what all this plastic is doing to fish, dolphins, whales, and birds. Plastic bags and straws end up in forests, streams, and rivers, where they harm animals, including birds and fish. But here's the hopeful news. You can help solve this problem by avoiding plastic wherever you can. Here are some simple tips and steps that you and your family can take. Stop using plastic bags and buying bottled water. Instead, use reusable shopping bags and get yourself a great-looking reusable water bottle to carry with you. Band together with your friends, teachers, and parents and encourage your school cafeteria to not use plates or utensils that get thrown away. Don't buy single-side servings of chips and cookies. They create too much waste. Learn more about recycling. Some plastic can be recycled. For further learning and inspiration, to learn more about grizzlies and bear safety, get Bear Smart Society, bearsmart.com. National Park Service at nps.gov/subjects/bears/safety.htm. To learn more about protecting animals and the environment, you can visit these websites: the World Wildlife Fund, worldwildlife.org, the Nature Conservatory, natureconservatory.org. To learn more recycling and creating less garbage, the National Institute of Environmental Health Science. Kids, you can just Google that. So, I hope you enjoyed this book. It was a pleasure reading to you. If you'd like to see all the books in the selected bibliography that Lauren Tarshis did, I would encourage you to check out this book at your library when they're open. Or you can come by and borrow Mrs. Sutton's copy that Caleb Johnston bought her and donated to her classroom last year. We would both be very happy to share it with you. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you for our next Quarantine Read Aloud series, the Chapter Book Edition. Bye.